like a reflex. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is IC 88. I am just gonna give everybody a few seconds to filter in. It's also early, so a few people might be slow getting here. So we'll get started in just a second. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is IC 88, Wheeled Mobility with Empathy During a Pandemic, Strategies for a Calm Approach. So my name is Laura Rice. I'll be the moderator this morning. Just as a reminder, please mute yourself. And I will also be providing the CEU code at the end of this session. For questions, you can put them in the chat. I believe Theresa is going to try to kind of filter those as we go, but I can also keep an eye on them and help at the end. All right, well, without further ado, I will turn it over to our wonderful speaker, Theresa Berner. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hear me okay? Laura, give me a thumbs up. Okay, I've had wacky things happen. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for the any West Coast people that are up early. We are reminiscing this morning with my crew here virtual that, you know, none of us were out late last night together, which is sad, but also we're like, wow, we feel refreshed today. So I can't wait till we all get back together again. I know that this is day 3 of us sitting behind a computer, and that can be exhausting on a different level. The handouts, I did put a handout in prior to, that's more of a Word document, but my slides should be uploaded shortly. I was having trouble with the link, and our great friends at Cvent are helping. So I wanted to let you guys know that. And as far as the presentation, I submitted this like many of you before our conference kept getting delayed. So I've kind of added things as we've experienced different shifts in the pandemic. My partner in crime, Amy, has since retired. She retired a year ago. And so she's with us in spirit. She couldn't make the conference, but she did contribute conceptually to some of the content. So I just wanted to make sure that I recognized her. As Laura said, I really wanted this to be interactive, and, you know, in the virtual world, please put things in the chat. I'll ask you to raise your hand just so that we can kind of get some validation with each other, because what my goal is for this, and I'll go through the objectives here, but I'm going to go over some active listening. I'm going to go over some boundary setting, and I'm going to talk about how to keep the team focused. There's no surprise that this has been a hard time for all of us. And this session is a little different in that I'm not talking about seating or techniques or with our everyday, but I really want to touch upon that. Let's take a minute, take a deep breath, and acknowledge that it's been really tough. And if I could help you with some strategies, some scripting, if you guys can help each other in the chat, maybe something that's worked for you. This is an area when we deal with pretty tough customers that it could really drain us. And with my team here, I hope I provide that setting for them. You don't see it on the website. Okay, yeah, Barb, it's going to be, we're working on getting it uploaded. So I hope that for my team, I'm able to be that sounding board, but I know many of you are by yourselves. You guys are out there working through some of these tough situations on your own. So I want this session to be a check-in with each other for validation, acknowledgement, and maybe sharing some tools to help us get through the difficult time. And even prior to the pandemic, a lot of our patients just have some challenges. So I wanted to start it off here because I've listened to different seminars outside of our seating that say, oh, during the pandemic, what did you learn? What's your hobby? Did you get to take some time to learn how to knit, to do some yoga? Did you take up a cooking class? I would guess that this does not apply to 98% of all of us here. And so that's where the chat, am I right? am I right that we have not been using all this downtime to pick up extra hobbies and habits? I feel like we've all been trying to survive. Yep, no knitting for Laura. And she's even got little kids. And those of you, we'll kind of talk about just the challenges that, trying to parent during a pandemic has not been very easy. So when I went and looked, and so initially, the Hensley reference is what I had as one of my standard kind of references on how the exhaustion that we have. But then I noticed that since I put the call for papers in until when I actually did my final preparation, there's been a lot of articles about how the pandemic has affected all of us. So the first one, just what resonated to me, that the pandemic might generate remarkable stress and emotional turmoil to healthcare providers who work during the outbreak. Yeah, you guys agree with this? The second one, healthcare providers often have to deal with unexpected emotions arising from both the patient and themselves. Yeah, anyone feel that way? And then the third one, even though this was kind of prior to the pandemic, I feel like this one really hits home now. Empathy also generates vulnerability for stress-related symptoms such as compassion fatigue and professional emotional exhaustion and burnout. Does that resonate with anybody? This is where I'm missing head nods. I hope it does resonate, and not just me. But the thing that I'm really aware of and trying to be sensitive to with my team as well as myself is that compassion fatigue and the emotional exhaustion. And we'll talk about that in a minute with some of the changes that our patients and ourselves have gone through. So this to me just validates that it's tough and you guys have a reason to feel tired. So, this famous quote by Maya Angelou, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. We have a lot of things coming at us and we choose how we can respond, but sometimes our response is limited by the energy we have to channel that response. When you go back to the original customer service, because I'm very big on customer service, even to the point of when my kids were young and I went to Disney World, I was blown away by their customer service. There was a day, it was like, 100 degrees. We were waiting for the bus to go to Epcot. The buses were late. I was irritated. My kids were, stir crazy. I just was ready to just rip someone out. And I got on the bus and the bus driver was like, welcome, have a magical day. And I thought to myself, how do you do that? How are you so nice all the time? And I actually bought their books on customer service because I wanted to understand that. And when we talk about customer service in our world, there's a service to customers and before, during, and after. So, people may be getting frustrated to figure out how they can get a referral to come to us. Sometimes people can't find us. And by the time they come to us, they're like, oh, I've been working on this for 6 months. Well, I'm glad you're here. But then we have that whole during where we want to trial the equipment. We got to coordinate with the vendor. The vendor has to do a home eval. And then we're that waiting on insurance, and insurance is asking for more information or possibly denying it. And then we have to balance that. Where's my chair? Where's my chair? And then they get the equipment and we say, we'd like you to come in for a delivery. Well, I don't want to come back. And so as you guys know, I hope this is all resonating, that we have this whole series that we're interacting with our customers. And the perception of the success of these interactions is dependent on employees, us, suppliers, who can adjust themselves to the personality of the guest. Well, we have some pretty tough personalities. I have a patient experience team at OSU that I will tap into when I'm trying to kind of just check in or get some validation, or the patients that have reported us up through the chain. And Kurt is his name, and he has told me that we in the seating clinic have the most difficult patients than anywhere else in the medical center. We have a really big medical center. So if that's not validation that, we can continue to adjust ourselves over and over, but sometimes there's only so much we can do, because sometimes it's not that they're bad, but they're challenging. So is this again looking for smiles, nods, hand raises? Do you guys agree with my assessment of our environment? Thank you, Laura. So please chat away. Yes, thank you. So if you think about where we're at, we have people with chronic disabilities. And what Kirk talks to me about, and he's reflecting to me, he's my patient experience guy, and he's reflecting to me that he's working with people across the whole medical system. So people that have family members in the ICU. And he's even said this to me through and after, during the pandemic. He's dealing with a lot of different variations. But what him and I have had conversations about is just when you have a chronic disability, there's challenges inherent to that. These, I always look through the eyes of my patient. I'm sure they've had hurdles. I'm sure that the parent of a adult person with developmental disabilities has had to fight and advocate. Like we don't know. And I'm sure that if they hadn't come out as their strong advocates, their child wouldn't have gotten what they needed. And as I've become a parent and I see that, I agree that I try to be empathetic with them. But what Amy and I always talked about was we're the helpers. We're the ones that can help you. We're here to solve your problems. What Dean said in the opening is that we're your advocates. We're here to help you. And when they come to us as we're the enemy, it gets really frustrating. And I myself find my triggers and my defensiveness going off. So that's our baseline. That's our baseline of the people that we have. Well, then we have the pandemic. I mean, think back, we all came back from Vancouver when the pandemic was starting, and just the unknown of, whoa, what does this mean? I was convinced it was going to be like a 6-month period. We were all going to get back to normal. I never would have imagined what the past 2 years have thrown us. So then we had people that couldn't come into clinic. Well, just because they can't come into clinic doesn't mean that their needs aren't changing. And we had to shift, and pivot is a big word that we've all used constantly. Telehealth. Well, we don't know if telehealth is good, but we have telehealth. It's the only thing we have. I've heard colleagues that were treating outside because they were working with DD population or group homes or facilities that they weren't physically allowed in. So I have heard some of my colleagues, and maybe some of you are in the audience, that had to treat outside with the supplier so that patient got what they needed. I think in my situation, I think, oh my gosh, the empathy that we have for each other. So then people started coming back to the clinic, but the rules changed. My team joked that we needed a whiteboard because every day, even sometimes midway through the day, the rules were changing. Was a visitor allowed? Were they not allowed? What type of mask could they wear? Do they have to wear shields? Should they check in? Do they need their temperature? Do they not need their temperature? We were like, okay, what are the rules? And so now where I feel like we are, as I was kind of wrapping up the presentation, schedules constantly changing. I mentioned earlier, those of you that have had to parent during the quarantine, I can't imagine. I've always been a working mom. I navigated daycare. I navigated kids calling off sick. I navigated that world of being a proud working mom. And I look at all of you that have school-age kids, young kids, kids in daycare, having to kind of homeschool your kids during the remote learning, having to deal with daycares that are constantly closing. Your child isn't sick, but your daycare is closed, so you don't have childcare. And then all of a sudden, childcare is open, but your child got exposed, so now your child is home. So we are having these constant shifts with staffing, not even talking about if we get sick, if we get quarantined, if we have a family member. And on the same respect, the patients are dealing with that as well. I had my office out last week, so I was covering the front and answering the phones. And last Friday, it was phone call after phone call after phone call. I've got to change my appointment. I can't come in. I was exposed. My child was exposed. I have this. My transportation canceled on me. And so the patients are pivoting. They're anxious. We're pivoting. The suppliers are pivoting. And it's this constant shuffle of reaction. You guys agree? I'm going to pause for a second. Yes, the school age kids, I can't imagine. Kudos to all of you. So what do we do? So I'm going to go through just some strategies. So empathy and compassion. This is in our blood. This is what we are built to do. This is what brought us in to healthcare. We would not be here if we didn't have empathy and compassion. These are back to the basics. So if we go back to the basics, this should not be new to anybody. So communicate with empathy, acknowledging the person's feelings. I do believe that sometimes people don't know how they come across. I personally have to really monitor my reaction. I know that my email communication isn't the same as my verbal communication because there's no intonation. So I'm constantly learning this. So when we acknowledge the person's feelings and reflect back to them, sometimes that levels it right away. If we, have a patient that had difficulty morning, their aide didn't show, they had to do Schedule B, their transportation was late, or maybe they had their own transportation, they couldn't find parking, they got into the building, and they come up to us and they're like, ugh, just kind of acknowledging, good morning. And when you see them reacting, wow, I'm sure your morning was rough. Thank you so much for coming. Because thanking them and acknowledging them for just getting here is a win. And that's for those of you that have people that come out to the clinic. Those of you that go into someone's home, I'm sure you have similarly examples. But just going back to reading words and nonverbal cues and reflecting the feelings you think you're seeing. And that's the reflection. Sound tentative and curious, not, well, you look mad. It's, wow, you look really frustrated. How can I help? Do you want to just take a minute and just catch your breath? It gives that validation to that person so they can correct it, because if you're reading their emotions and they don't realize how they came across, sometimes that just levels it and validates it. So again, respond to the feelings you're hearing, the tone of someone's voice. I do this on the phone a lot, like, wow, you sound really frustrated. You sound anxious. And they're like, I'm not anxious. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. Okay. Well, let's just kind of slow down. And I'm here to support you, just constant reinforcing. And so accept and not be judgmental. I don't have my ID on, but we have a thing it's kind of like the elevator. I'm going to show it here. It's the mood elevator. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but the top of it is grateful. The bottom one is stressed and burned out. And so they say curious is in the middle. So stay curious, because then that allows you to move up the elevator rather than down. And I will tell you that I derail myself and I have to get off the elevator and back on in order to go up to be curious, patient. And that goes back to the triggers. So heart, head, heart is an empathy technique. And it goes back to address the feelings, convey factual information, and then close on a personal note. Sounds pretty simple, but depending on where we're at in the mood elevator, it can not be that easy. When I first became a clinician, this was something that we were taught, the HEAT model: hear them out, empathize, apologize, and take action. Me as a manager, I have to take the heat a lot. That doesn't mean it's any easier than it is for my frontline staff. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes when I have like issue after issue after issue, my coworkers will hear you. Please don't put in the chat all my faults. Oh, no, you can. But it's like, oh my gosh, I need some positive. I need some like positive recognition, because when you're only dealing with problems, you can be really skewed. And again, this is in the handout. I will get it all to you if you need it. And you can all email me as well, but the handout should be on. So I wanted to pause with an example. So we have, and I wanted to do a non-seating example. So we have a driving program, which many of you probably have in your organization. And we have a program called pre-driving readiness. And what it is individuals that have autism sometimes are uncertain if driving is a realistic goal for themselves. And what we found is that if we could bring them in and through an assessment, look at the common kind of constructs of what is required for driving, we could either say, hey, you seem like you're a good candidate, you should proceed and get your permit. Or we may say, you know, it may not be ready, but we're going to give you some things to do as a passenger so that parents and the student or the teenager, as a passenger, we want you to work on these things and then come back and we'll see if you're ready. Or the third one is, wow, this may not be a realistic goal. And the reason I love this program is because we all know that driving is it's a rite of passage and it's very important. And everybody wants to be like their peers, but it's hard for the parents because you have the very protective parents or you have maybe not so great insight. And so we hope to be that sounding board. So that's the background. So I heard that there was a parent that was really upset and really anxious and just calling everywhere to get information. So I called her and I said, hi, I'm the manager for the driving program, and I understand you want to speak to the OT. She's on the road with patients, which is true, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Because sometimes I could triage, I can answer more questions than the scheduling staff can, but as you guys know, you can't spend time on the phone. You have to be with the patients. Well, the mom's reaction was, well, I don't know who you are, but I need to speak to the person who will be working with my child. And the tone of her voice was very, this is somebody that has had to advocate for their child their entire life. And I would guess they have not had good interaction. And so if you think of the mindset of a parent, they probably had to really be an advocate. So then she went on to say, well, I need to guarantee they have everything they need about my child, about autism, and only I can teach them. And I want to go through everything they need to know. And she just was like, blah, 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 at me. My triggers of defensiveness got up, and I tried to keep my dinner tone conversation that I'll talk to you guys about, but I acknowledged it. Thank you so much for wanting to assure that we have the information. You sound like a great advocate for your child. We really appreciate you taking the time to reach out. I want you to know you will have time at the eval to provide the information to the therapist. It's really difficult for her to call you because she's in the car with other patients. Thank you so much for taking time to call. We really look forward to seeing you at the appointment. What do you think? Do you think that was an okay response? I tried to acknowledge, tried to give some core. Yes, Barb, thank you. Help me understand can be very powerful. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, Barb, about the ask, tell, ask. But I tried using my dinner conversation voice, and I really tried hard because I kept thinking as my empathetic self, wow, this mom, she really wants to make sure that her time is well used. The other piece of it is that they didn't have insurance for Ohio State. So because they were out of network for Ohio State, we ended up giving them the self-pay discount, which was a very, very competitive price. I also was talking to her about maybe DD services or any alternate funding sources, but nothing that I did could help. So then she started calling everybody. She started calling, my director. She called customer service. She called our physician office. She just was calling everyone. I could not get her to stop. So I called my friend in customer patient experience, old Kurt, and this is what he said. You've offered her everything you can. Unfortunately, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, her daughter is not special. Your patient population sees the full spectrum of disorders and disabilities. So although she has valuable insight, it's nothing your team can't work through using proven techniques. You've shared several times about the payment, and if she's stuck on that, if she wants to schedule, she can. If not, she needs to move on. So this is someone outside of our kind of seating industry, outside of my team. And I mean, I kind of disagree. We all think our family members are special. But what he was trying to normalize is that if she doesn't want to come, she doesn't have to. I mean, I also offered to her, we have a driving program, another one in the community that she did have benefits for. And we work very collaboratively. And so there was nothing that I could do to help her because she wanted to talk to the therapist. And I knew that it would be at least an hour. So I ended up talking to the therapist and saying, it's up to you. If you feel like investing time ahead is going to make your time more efficient, you're free to do that, but I need you to set some boundaries because I need this to not get out of control. So I wasn't very successful, but my attempt was, I can't go so empathetic that she's walking on me, but I can't get so mean because she's a person with a child with a disabilities. So I wasn't successful. So I had to step away and get someone else involved. She ended up coming, the appointment ended up being fine, and the individual ended up being a good candidate for driving. So it all worked out in the end, but it really kind of exhausted me with what I was having to try to mediate. So this is another strategy. So listen carefully and explain in a way others understand. I think this is something that we all feel like we understand, but it's hard for us to know what they're hearing. So continues to say, be present, demonstrate listening. The managed technology is when we all went to EMRs and trying to figure out how to help the person be heard. And I'm really interested when I go to appointments, how my different providers handle the technology. I think we've all kind of gotten used to that, but I kept this on because this wasn't a resource that we had. But the personalized explanations, there's a large gap between what the patients understand. So ask, tell, ask is ask what they know and want to know, provide your explanation, and then verify for them. Have them explain it back to you. So Barbara, I think this has helped me understand. I think this is similar to maybe what you're thinking of. In my recent experience with this is my father was pretty sick the past 6 months, and I watched my family try to interpret and understand what was going on. He ended up going to a subacute facility and he never made it home. Unfortunately, he passed, but this whole period as being a therapist and being an OT, I had to be aware of my customer service with the team, because sometimes I saw myself as peers to his therapist, and sometimes I saw myself as an advocate. But what's really interesting is watching my family, watching my dad. He would just agree with them. Yep, yep, yep. And then he was like, I don't know why the heck they're having to use a sliding board. And then my brother and my sister would, so I had to constantly debrief every evening. And I was trying to get them to repeat back to the physician or the nurse or the therapist. It's okay for you to ask them to understand, because my family perceived like they did, but they didn't. And so having somebody repeat back to you in their own words can also be really powerful, because you can also figure out where there may be a differentiation in your understanding. So here's some other just strategies that, again, probably aren't new, but just a good check-in. So, engage patients and families as partners. I've said in other presentations that it took me a while to get to this, because as a new clinician, I had this idea that I was their advocate and I was going to fight and I was going to prove to everyone they needed the equipment, and my gosh, I'm going to win. But then I realized that, families actually have a little more power, because one, they're the beneficiary of the insurance, but two, they're the one living with this condition. When I did a role on Capitol Hill about 10 years ago, and I was like, okay, let's go tell these people. And I was guided that I had a consumer with me, and they're like, well, they really want to hear from the consumer. And I had this girl she's a new injury, and she had a private insurance. She had a titanium chair, and titanium doesn't get covered anymore. And she was now on, I know she was on Medicaid. I think she's Medicare, Medicaid. So I tried to explain to her that you're not going to get the same equipment that you've got now because of the policies. And she didn't understand that, but she was really intimidated to talk. But I said, they want to listen to you. So they really want to listen to you. And I would go in rooms and they were like, no, you stop. I want to hear from her. So I think that taught me that I need to not only be that advocate, but I need to carry them along. So I need to empower people. I need them to know they're a partnership. I need to know that they're a part in the decision making. When I was on inpatient and I had some of my patients with spinal cord injury that did not want the chair, they weren't engaged. I mean, I wouldn't want it, As soon as I made a decision that wasn't including them, it was my fault. And so I also learned quickly on that shared decision making and helping them be engaged. encourage them to speak up, listen, and the listen respectfully is maybe when someone's coming in and the vendor's the enemy. I feel very, very confident that we're partners. The vendor and the clinicians have to be on the same page. If we're not, then the patient's going to split us. And so making sure that if there's already a frustrating situation, that we have kind of moved on from that. Focus on the value, what the person is saying, and find something to validate. I understand you're frustrated. That's the past. Let's focus on now. Trying to redirect people into the productive discussions. Talked about patient choice and helping give them educated choices. So engaging patients and families as partners. These are just some more, defining the roles of each team member. This is what you can expect from me. This is what you can expect from the supplier. This is the physician's role. Earlier in the conference, there was a United Spinal, my wheelchair app. I went back and looked at that again, and there's some really good role differentiation in that resource. We as therapists have the tools to set the tone and set that expectation. And families can ask for private consultations, but we need to make sure we're on the same page with the suppliers. We have to be really careful not to throw people under the bus. It's easy to make assumptions. We have to pause and get both sides of the story, make sure that we're transparent. One thing that I think that we do, because I'm in a seating clinic, all we do all along is seating, which I think a lot of you do too, but stop and ask them what their goal is. One time the physician had this whole grandiose plan, and then he came in and the patient didn't want what the physician was saying. And then I had to go back, and then the physician was like, well, but they could get all this. I'm like, but that's not what they want. That's not what they came in here for. And so we have to make sure that we're pausing and just asking them what their goal is for the visit. We use FMA and whatever outcome tools. I've heard some great outcome tools during this conference, but that gives us that feedback on the continued use. And like I said, continue to work on their goals. So effective closing, how you close a session leaves them with a lasting impression, affects their adherence to the plan of care, comments and recommendations to others. I don't know if my coworker Wendy is in here, but I've learned a lot from how she does closure. We in Epic have an after visit summary. I will tell you, I'm not that good at using it. She's really good at using it. So this is how using the team on here's the expectations. So everybody knows what the next steps are. Everybody is clear about what is expected. Even with the vendor, like if I make an assumption that I'm working with Phil, but then I'm working with Adam. Well, maybe Phil does things different than Adam. So I need to make sure that, okay, my understanding is this is the next steps that you're going to do. So make sure again that the patient understands, they repeat that back to you. So you do all of this. And just like with my driving patients, I thought, yeah, I got this, but it's not working. Well, then what do? This is really easy for that elevator to go down and start getting into being impatient, irritated, anxious, judgmental. It's easy for that. So how do you stay curious and how do you stay collaborative? Well, setting boundaries. And this has also been something that I have continued to work on, talk through with my team. I feel that empathy and compassion, that sometimes if I set boundaries, it means that I'm not caring. And it's something that I've had to really, really work on. So explaining the goal of the appointment is setting a boundary. Here's what we're going to accomplish. This is by the end of the session. This is where we're going to be. If somebody is late and we have only a certain amount of time, set that timeline. No, I'm so glad that you made it. I apologize that you had so much time this morning. That must be really frustrating to you. But since we only have 45 minutes, this is how we're going to use the time today. Because when I don't see this, I see the therapist get stuck in feeling that need to, well, it's not their fault that they were late. I just need to continue with it. But what happens is it bounces back and affects the next patient, the next patient, the next patient. So having that, it's okay to set those time limits. Specifically what options are available. I understand that, you want this specific, feature on your chair, looking at ways that maybe they can get it, that ongoing debate between the supplier and the therapist on, but I want this, but there's no funding. Was there funding or is it a is it I'm trying to think of the word, like a profit. And so it's easy for us. That's where we need to be on the same page. And if we see somebody that wants a lot of upgrades, we could help them address maybe how they can get them at a different time. The changing topics is something that is really common. It's all those rabbit holes. If somebody's upset about something, they keep going back, or they keep talking about the previous experience, bringing them back to what you're discussing, bring them back to the present moment, and help them understand what the goals are for that session. I already talked about repeating back. In the dinner table voice, when I was a new therapist on the spinal cord team, I had a peer advisor that was amazing. And we did like a lot, well, you guys do it too, peer support. And he used this dinner table voice. And so he was talking to people that were newly injured, and especially quads. He said, you're often going to have to ask for help. And how you ask for help is sometimes how it will be received. So you can say, can you get that door for me? Because I can't get it. And you can be really angry. Or you could say, hey, can you open that door? Just like you would say, hey, pass me the potatoes. Hey, can I have some salad? Hey, do you mind picking up that whatever that I just dropped? Keeping that dinner table tone is really important. And I use this every day, all day in all my interactions. And if I can keep my tone down, it suppresses my triggers and my anxiety that makes me want to just fly off the handle. And again, this is always better in person with the whole team present. When I have emails flying about this patient didn't like this, they wanted to do a home delivery, they hate their chair, they're mad at the vendor didn't get the information. It's like, stop, time out, we need to come into clinic. Getting everybody in, and again, I'm sensitive to where everybody is at in the community, but having everybody at the table or at the appointment is so valuable because you all get on the same page. And if you can use technology to do that, then I commend you. But having to pause and say, we need to all be together. And we've used technology when we had to for this. This is something that we implemented. The outpatient rehab has a therapy expectation. It essentially just says, it tries to prevent those no-shows. It gets buy-in from the patient that says, I get that I'm supposed to be here 2 to 3 times a week. I understand if I constantly no-show or cancel that my time will be given up for someone else. So when we had that scheduling the final fitting and the patient saying, no one told me that, I'm not coming. No one told me I had to do that. And these are for some complex cases that are custom mold. And the therapist is like, I clearly said it. It's in your after visit summary. It's something that we were very clear upon. How do we hold that accountability? So we started this within the past year, and we added for our clinic, we added a seating one, a driving one, and an AAC one. And so the therapist reviews it with the patient and has them sign it. Does this mean if they sign it and something happens that we're not gonna work with them? No, but it's a tool that makes them pause, read it, and know that, okay, they're serious about it. And then if it's a situation that we really feel like it's unsafe for them to have that delivery outside of the clinic, then we can hold them accountable to it. So this is an idea maybe that you guys might want to use. Whoops. This is another resource for you that I thought was really a good resource that came from our medical center. It doesn't have OSU on it, but it's Scarlet and Gray. It's a resource that we have within the med center. And it's something I've had to kind of pause because there's people that I felt were very aggressive, but they were really just threatening. Or there's people that I thought were threatening that were really just disruptive. And so this kind of differentiates between what is disruptive and what is threatening. It's not okay for them to be disruptive, but if they're threatening and we can't de-escalate it, then we call security. If they cross that line, we need to enlist other helpers. And so read through this and just see if this helps you kind of differentiate. In our security, our safety security, it's a zero tolerance. So if somebody is threatening and somebody is not respecting us, they will kind of come in and help. But that feels weird to us because we're empathetic, compassionate people. So this is something that I pulled because do any of you have those patients that say, well, I don't want to work with Theresa anymore. I want to work with Wendy. They start answer shopping. They want to work with a therapist that they think is going to tell them what they want. Or the therapist that did set boundaries is the bad person now. And so when somebody asks about if they can switch therapists, and this happens in driving because maybe one of the therapists failed them. And so they think it's a personal attack and they want to go to someone else. So we have processes in place. But when I went to Kurt in customer service, I'm like, what are the rules? You know, this came from the AMA, and a physician can terminate the patient-physician relationship with, you could read this on, you know, certain situations, but they have to give the patient a chance to redeem themselves. They could transfer the patient's care. What we're doing is definitely not as impactful as maybe what may happen in a physician visit, but just think through if you're on a team and somebody's trying to maybe work within an answer shop. So I have another case for you. So this is one of my colleagues, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing this. So the patient comes to his appointment with his aide, but never any family. A person has significant wear and tear on the power chair that's really beyond reasonable. And after, so we go through the appointment, then after the appointment, mom calls the therapist. She's not very nice. She's rude. She's accusatory. No one's listening to her. She's just not easy to deal with. Patient is competent. He is responsible for decision making. So it's not that the issue is she's not coming with him. So he's coming and then she's calling and then it's just this chaos. My team has a porcupine. It's a candle holder. And whenever they hear someone on the phone with a difficult patient, they pass that porcupine to them because it's like, okay, now's your time on the docket. And I think that's kind of cute. I'm not in the office with them, so I would probably hoard the porcupine. But I think that's a good way of saying, gosh, I know you're on a difficult situation. It's going to be okay. We're here to support you. So what we did was we pulled aside with the supplier, the therapist, and myself, okay, what is our plan? How can we set some boundaries? What are our roles? And so then we presented to the patient and mom that, you know, we really need you to be here, part of the plan. And if you can't be here, then maybe you can dial in and we can be present. We outline the expectations and ask him to report back his understanding at the appointment, try to get everybody in line. And then summarize it in the after visit summary. This wasn't solved overnight, but the perseverance of the therapist and the supplier made this more manageable than if we just continually had that cycle of mom continuing to be all over us. Another case, and I'm going to go through this a little quick. This is a patient with paraplegia who was coming in for a new chair. So during the history and background gathering, he became very defensive and argumentative, and the therapist came to get me. Now, this is a therapist that sets very good boundaries, does not take crap from anybody, and she never has to come get me. And I thought, this might be really bad if she can't handle this. So I went in very, very curious. I was trying to explain to him the reason why she was asking. She basically was asking for, she wanted to record what his chair was, but the chair he had wasn't the chair we had in the final fitting, and the serial number was scratched out. So she was just trying to report where it came from. We don't care where it came from. We're just trying to tell the story. He was so angry. And for whatever reason, he wasn't triggering me. Like on a certain day, I either would have been so empathetic and let him walk all over or roll all over me, or I would have been like pissed because like, chill out, dude. He just kept arguing and arguing. Well, then he took his camera out and he started videotaping me. And he started like accusing me. He's going to sue me and everyone else. Well, he started getting everyone in the background. So I was very calm. And I said, I really, I don't care if you videotape me because I don't, but you cannot videotape patients. If you don't stop, I'm going to call security. And so then it kind of fed into him. Well, you call security. Well, we did. And security came and it escalated him more. And he was mad. I just kept calm. I'm like, dude, in my head, I'm like, this kid is hurting. This kid is angry, is scared. But you know what? He crossed the boundaries. He was disrespectful. He was angry and he was threatening. So I pretty much said, you could leave or I can help you leave. I literally wanted to just push him out. but I couldn't because my respect for him and his, the chair is part of his body, but he would not stop. And he was becoming so disruptive to the rest of the department. We had to remove him. So he did leave on his own. Security did escort him to make sure he left the building. And when I reflected, I knew that there were certain times that, I wouldn't have been able to stay that calm, but for whatever reason, he didn't hit my triggers. And I've learned to understand what my triggers are. So you can teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce. You guys do not have to be verbally abused. You do not have to be yelled at. You do not have to be treated in a disrespectful manner that sometimes people come to you. We know they're dealing with a lot. You guys, like I said, are built with empathy, but there's a certain level that you have a reason to be respected. So going on, these are some examples that, on the phone, using reflection, documenting conversations. These are just some phrases that you guys can look over. I don't know, is the handout up yet? I just kind of want to, I want to go through this a little quicker on time, but the handout should be up. And if not, I'll give you my email at the end. In the clinic, this is something to always position yourself with your back to the door. The driving therapists have a private room that the seating therapists, obviously have bigger space. We talked about you never should have the patient be between you and the door. You need to always be so you can exit safely. We had a situation where the therapist was sharing that she didn't think the person was a safe driver, and that person started throwing things. And so that was a kind of wake-up call that we need to position ourselves where we can be safe. It's always about us being safe, and it's about that zero tolerance. If you're not in a situation where you have customer service or security, think about what your exit strategies are. Think about how you can make yourself have the most success. And the hardest part, I say my superpower is staying calm, because it's really hard when you're being the one that you feel like you're attacked. And you can do this if you know what your triggers are to get yourself out of the situation before it starts. I talked about this a few years ago, but there's patients' rights, but there's also patient responsibilities. Look back, everybody signs this. I think we get focused on the patient's rights, but they also have a responsibility, and their responsibility is to be respectful and courteous to us. These next sessions, actually, these came through yesterday, so I added them really quick. We have a group called First Impressions that works with our office staff on being empathetic and things to look for. And these are some examples and some scripting that you can have. And know that you can have a good day, you can have a bad day. Just because you have a bad day doesn't mean that those good days aren't going to come. You also will make an impact on people. You will find that when you use that reflection and get them to normalize and level out, you've given them a chance to kind of catch their breath. The sustainability is knowing when to walk away, be a good team member and help out. We're lucky that we have a clinic setting where if we see somebody is in a difficult situation, we can walk over. Somebody can come get me. We can call security. I keep repeating, know your triggers. Some days you have to just let it go. That's also been hard for me because I'm a perfectionist and I want everything to work out. And sometimes you have to let it go. You have to practice balance and good self-care. And with self-care, you have to protect your downtime. You have to have a friend, coworker that you can go to, have that exercise, helping someone out. Sometimes that's good as caregivers. Pets, hobbies, reflection, journaling. The teamwork, I think, is just so important. Sometimes it's virtual. Sometimes, it's not going to be in the same environment, but know those tough cases and prepare. I think role playing ahead of time and having a plan, having access to keep everybody on the same page. The celebrate success is something too that we get so focused on solutions that sometimes we don't celebrate our successes. Our wheelchair vendor, I don't know if he's on here, but he came back and he gave the team some really good feedback about how happy a patient was. he had gone to the home to do some follow-up, and the communication device, the seating device, and just taking that time to say, hey guys, this patient was so grateful and this is what he's doing. That really feels good. We don't celebrate successes enough. Share those successes with each other, and stay cohesive. Don't let the patients split us. They do that as a survival skill, and we have to stay on the same page. And the last thing is have fun. We'll have pizza days, we'll have waffle making. We can't go out as we used to with happy hours because of the whole pandemic, but find those ways to have fun. Passing the porcupine is a way to have fun and be able to kind of take things down a notch. So we all may not have had time during the pandemic to pick up an extra hobby or learn some extra things. Maybe we should or can for that work-life balance. But I just want to say that, you guys have sustained an incredibly difficult time. It's not just the nurses in the ICU, it's team members like yourselves. You're working with a very difficult patient population who is under enormous stress. You are under enormous stress, and my kids are college age and my stresses are different than yours, but that doesn't mean, they belittle. And again, kudos to all of you that have been homeschooling, remote schooling, shifting daycares, adjusting your life. You guys truly steward a mission through rocky waters. So continue the fight and find some time to honor yourselves and give yourselves a pat on the back. So that is all I have. I can go ahead and give you my email. I'm going to share with the entire meeting. Anyone have any feedback, thoughts?
Theresa, I can put your email in the chat if you'd like. So
that'd be great.
And I apologize. We are working on getting the handouts uploaded. Just some technical difficulties. Theresa, we can talk more in a minute, but do apologize. But I think we'll be able to get those like after the fact, so they will be available.
And my email is my first name dot last name, and she'll go ahead and put it in.
I'll put it in just one.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for the feedback. Those of you that are typing it in, and any of my coworkers that are on, thank you for everything that you guys are doing. You know that I adore you and appreciate you. I can't point you out now.
Thank you so much. That was a great talk. And I think too, I was thinking about other populations that I work with that I think will be very helpful as well. I know my graduate students are like very different population, but they're also feeling a lot of stress and strain. So I definitely will be using some of these techniques for them with them. I think we have addressed all of the comments or questions. There's a lot of great comments there, but we have a few minutes if anybody has any other discussion that they'd like to share.
Or any strategies that you guys use? I was also going to tell you, we have a rolling barista that we use, self-serving. So look at this. I have a water kettle, and we will have barista hour where we do pour overs. And then we've also accommodated the tea lovers. So have to really find some of that, whatever it is, chocolate, salt. You guys are awesome. Have a great rest of the conference, and shoot me an email for anything that I can help with.
So I put the code in the chat. I'll put it again because it got mixed in with some of the other stuff, but I'll read it off just 1 second. So it is, hold on, make sure I'm in the right session. It is VK8D6K.